Be in the newsroom. Yes, it's time for the world this week. 7 days for Paris-based correspondents. 1 hour with us is Craig Capitas of Quartz and the Atlantic, Gregory Viscusi of Bloomberg News, Vivian Walt of Time Magazine, and Angela Diffley of sister station Radio France International. The world this week, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag TWTW. 2 weeks into another war without pictures. The French army, though, putting out a video of an undisclosed location in northern Mali Thursday, where French planes target what's described as jihadist rebels. We know that French troops are advancing northwards. Militarily, the objective to seize back the main northern cities of Gao and Timbuktu. Paris has planned to have nearly 3,000 soldiers in combat with air support, logistics, and to quickly be able to hand over to West African forces. Now, the first to arrive under a UN mandate 1 week ago, the Togolese, 145 soldiers, but it took 2 days and 4 separate flights. The only way to get there, the president's jet, which only seats 45. The French feeling, Vivian Walt, very alone still at this point.
Completely alone, and frankly, just with big holes in their military capability. Surprisingly enough, they rushed in there with tremendous vigor, and it looked great for the first couple of days, but nobody has rushed in after them, and for good reason, really. I mean, if you look at some of the reports, the sort of post-mortem that NATO did about the Libya campaign, for example, which was also led by the French and the British very nearly got, a real hammering in that theatre, and really, according to NATO, was only saved by the US coming in with air support, logistics, armed drones and surveillance drones, all of which the US have been fairly reluctant to furnish this time around.
They are having intelligence drones, though, fly over.
Indeed, and they have for several months, but no armed drones, no real combat capabilities. The French very badly need the US to supply things like transporters, refueling, and so on, which are really lacking in the French military.
The largest contingent from Africa to arrive so far, 2,000 soldiers from nearby Chad with experience in desert warfare. The help is wanted fast. France has put a price tag on its operation, 30 million euros. However, that sounds conservative. And already there's been a row with Washington when the Pentagon at the start of the week wanted to charge France for using its transport and refueling planes. Washington has since backed down. It's free of charge for now. In satirical weekly, the Canard Enchaîné, François Hollande is quoted as privately ruining the Germans for not doing more, saying it's all fine and good to ask us to respect the rule on deficits, but how about sharing the bill? Gregory Viscusi, I know you went to Berlin for the earlier in the week when there was the celebrations of the 50th anniversary of the Élysée Treaty. Was there much talk of Mali on that trip?
They did talk about Mali quite a bit, sort of on and off the record. I think I wouldn't exaggerate French annoyance with the Germans over this issue, because I just don't think they expect much more of them. I mean, Germany is not a military power for a whole bunch of reasons, which we know. And I think it's just reality. It's just that way. The Germans are not going to be in there fighting. They've not done a military operation of note since 1945 for good reason. And the French don't expect them to be there. As far as paying the bill, I mean, the Germans are flying transport rotations down there. I don't really think the French can really quite send a bill for fighting a war to the Germans. So I don't think the French expect that much.
But how about the Americans?
Well, it was very shabby of the Americans to be billing the French for transport at the very beginning. And apparently that was the White House that wanted to. Apparently the Pentagon was kind of shocked at the White House wanting to present a bill. But I don't think it's that surprising the French are in there alone. I mean, there are not that many European countries with military capability. It's France and Britain. They can't fight together in a war like this because it would raise questions as to who's under whose command. So I don't think it's that surprising that the French are alone in
No,
this
I
one.
think it's also interesting that François Hollande didn't inform Angela Merkel beforehand, before he dropped the bombs on January the 11th, and that is interesting.
Or Barack
a lot of
Obama.
people, a lot of people have suggested that the Merkel-Sarkozy duo. Sarkozy would have routinely informed Angela Merkel. So that's interesting, I think. And as far as Britain is concerned, and many other countries have raised the point that they are still occupied in Afghanistan, whereas France has withdrawn. Germany is still in Afghanistan as well. And I think a number of countries have made that point.
Jacobitis?
Well, I heard that Napoleon is tunneling his way out of his tomb and is going to go for political asylum in Italy. When this event started, you may recall, everyone kept their mouth shut for a few days to see what would happen, which is fair. There's a war going on down there. And what has the past few weeks shown us? That a Boy Scout troop could have probably done better than the French army.
Hang on, you say that.
Hollande made three, as someone who's covered many wars, Hollande has made three essential errors. He was not prepared to go in. He did not have backup reinforcements or a supply chain before he went in. And the worst thing that he turned out with is that he went in relying, believing that African troops were going to come in to support him, his military logistics.
But did he really believe that?
Well, if he didn't believe that, then he's more naive than I think he is.
But what is worrying as well is that there's growing concern about what the actual aims of the war are. And apparently he spoke to Cameron on the phone and said, I'll go right to the end, j'irai jusqu'au bout. And people are asking questions about what the actual aims are. He's talked about reclaiming the north of Mali on behalf of the government. Initially, it was just, we will stop their entry as far as Bamako and we'll pull out, we'll be out within a week.
You actually believe that?
I mean, I think that we're making... Let's get beyond, who's supporting the war, who's in there, and so on. And look down the line, 2-3 months, okay, they're going to get to Timbuktu, Gao, probably. They will, in some shape or form be on the ground in northern Mali. But that's not the question. The question is how they deal with it then. Because these are very long-term problems. You've just... this country's really never actually settled its northern question. It's had Tuareg separatists active there for a very long time. You've had Al-Qaeda forces going back and forth from southern Algeria into northern Mali. And, the big question is, what is the West going to do then? And who is actually going to occupy this?
One of the questions that's being raised is there were photos that were published in one of the newspapers here, Le Parisien, of what appeared to be tanks. The question that's being asked more and more is who's arming these guys, and a lot of people are looking towards the Gulf states.
Well, a lot of those tanks, a lot of the heavy weaponry that the rebels have in the north was basically driven up from Bamako, from other parts of Mali, when they took the north. They simply, absconded with some of the military equipment. And of course, Libya, which is where a lot of the, ammunition, automatic rifles, etc., RPGs come from. But the tanks and so on, apparently U.S. Equipment, which was handed to the Malian military and then absconded with.
Vivian is absolutely right. You're not going to hold this country long term with 2,145 troops, 145 of them from Togo, who had to arrive on 3 flights on a presidential plane. The real question here, the political question is, where was French intelligence on this? Who was briefing François Hollande? Did he know that there were tanks there, that the rebels had tanks? The conventional wisdom is so far that he didn't know. So this thing was a folly from the start.
All right, the two points on this. First of all, on this issue of who has to pay for this operation, France spends 2.2% of its GDP on defense, nearly twice what the Germans spend, by the way. That's still only half of what the U.S. spends. Philip Carter, writing in Foreign Policy, says, we need a new business model for NATO. Only a tough love policy, such as the one being pushed by the White House on France now, will incentivize our allies to shoulder their share of the task, whether in Mali or the next place where we act in the world. A reaction from Africa here, from Buto and Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. The Malians, just like the Libyans, are paying with their lives the consequences of a poor political system and the exploitative Western intervention. And again, that's another problem which we come to with the French being all alone. France is the former colonial power in Mali. Being alone means that as the French army advances, Paris also has to worry about a possible bloodbath on its watch. Vivian was mentioning the Arabs and Tuaregs, Malians who have nothing to do with the rebellion, and they're scared. They're scared of reprisals. The Malian army, dazed by a string of routs, has already carried out revenge slaughters of insurgents, prompting this call by the French defense minister on France 24.
There's a risk for today, but also in the future, because Tuaregs, apart from those who have been manipulated by terrorist groups that we totally condemn, the Tuaregs are our friends.
Jean-Yves Le Drian, who said that he's counting on the leadership of the Malian army to show a sense of responsibility to avoid all abuses. Their honor is at stake. And there is the problem of France, the old Pottery Barn rule that France now suddenly owns all of the aspects of this conflict.
Well, I think the key to the aftermath is whether or not they can split off the Tuaregs from the sort of the international jihadists. I mean, that was the sense of the talks that were going on before everything broke down, and that jihadist offensive towards Bamako started a few weeks ago, and that's what they've got to get back to. Is what the Algerians and the French have been working on, because if the Tuaregs can be split off to support some kind of settlement with the government in Bamako, then there is some hope to holding the north in the sense that they are the locals, whereas the international jihadist types are not from there. They're mostly Algerian, Tunisian, and they're not particularly liked by the locals. So yes, they can go into the desert and sort of try to hide away, but they're not on home soil the way the people of the West was fighting in Afghanistan were. So I think the whole Tuareg issue is the key.
Yes,
to
I
any
agree with that.
settlement
And I
afterwards.
think because some of the forces coming in from Niger and places like that, they have Tuareg contingents within the force. So you don't want any conflict of allegiances there. The sooner the Tuaregs are separated from the jihadists, as is obvious, that is the key to the.
Yeah, the
whole
jihadists
thing.
are not popular. They're not popular with the locals. They have no local base there. But obviously the Tuaregs do. So if we're going to be fighting the Tuaregs, then France is in deep, deep, deep trouble.
Yeah.
If they're not, then there's some hope.
It seems to me like we shouldn't underestimate the enormous gap between the Tuaregs and the Malians in Bamako. This really is effectively two countries. And when you're in Timbuktu, you really do not feel like you're part of Mali. And locals there don't feel like they're part of Mali. They don't have any connection to Bamako. And in what connection they have is resentment and years of grudges about lack of paved roads, lack of services, no electricity. You walk around, I've been in Timbuktu, you walk around at night, there is no electricity, there is nothing. And this is going to take some massive sort of Marshall Plan to...
But theoretically, some sort of a solution would involve some kind of autonomy for the North.
For the North.
Not splitting off into a separate country, but
Right.
being in charge of their own affairs.
So stories will certainly continue to follow. In the Times Have Changed department, a couple of strong signals out of Washington this week. First, there were the words of the president during his inauguration speech.
Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well.
The president weighing in on same-sex marriage, the tide also turning on women serving in combat. 3/4 of Americans now approve. Turns out that it's a done deal now with the U.S. Defense Secretary signing the deal. And it turns out also, interestingly enough, that many women already serve in combat.
Well, what is combat these days? Are we going to have women, sitting behind a computer pushing buttons on, the drone missions? Or I must say, I think it's great. It's wonderful that women can, serve in all positions the same as men. I do have a hard time imagining that they are going to be among those carrying 100 pounds of equipment on their back through the mountains of Afghanistan. I mean, we really need to be realistic that there are actually differences between men and women.
But if they've passed the physical tests,
I guess so. Yeah, we'll see. Certainly, I would imagine the U.S. military is out looking for good recruits.
And they're allowed to set aside certain combat areas where women won't be allowed
I'm sure they will.
to
Right.
participate.
I mean, I think it's just a sense of reality that the whole notion of what's combat, what isn't, it doesn't exist in modern warfare. There are no fronts anymore. It can be more dangerous just driving a truck from one base to another, which women do and have died doing in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, than it is operating an artillery unit, which is considered combat.
They do fly fighter jets.
They fly fighter jets.
Yeah.
They fly helicopter missions. So, I mean, there is no such thing as a front anymore. So the distinction between combat and non-combat doesn't exist.
But it does allow them then to apply for senior positions, which at the moment they're ineligible for.
mostly.
And,
for
and
the
that
most part.
does get you thinking, if they
Of course,
were running the whole
not
thing,
everybody
then it would
agrees
change.
with this decision. Writing in the National Review, there is this piece by Nancy McDonald where she says, only someone deliberately blind to human reality could maintain that putting men and women in close quarters 24 hours a day will not produce a proliferation of sex, thus introducing all the irrational passions and resulting favoritism of physical attraction into an organization that should be exclusively devoted to the mission of combat
Oh,
preparedness.
spare me. That's what they used to say about gay soldiers. I mean, that's,
Yeah, I think America's enemies should be scared to death that we're going to put guns in the hands of women and put them on the front line, because
Go on.
no, I think I think women make terrific combat soldiers. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to do a major story on women who were serving on the front line during Gulf War I, and I spent a number of weeks with them. They weren't supposed to be up there, but they were. And these are tough ladies. They're very smart. What Greg said about, they were saying the same things about gay soldiers is absolutely true. And guess what? Sex goes on in the military and in these forward bases. Hey, welcome to life, National Review.
When we come back, the World This Week continues. We'll look at David Cameron lighting the referendum fuse. Stay with us.